All right, here we are. We've just worn ourselves out by talking about spirit bodies and
And donkeys and mules.
the possibility of there
The
being a
retrospective
different
glorification
a
of
different
Enoch.
and a different why are we assuming that death is glorification for the spirit? There is something there that needs to be explored.
It does seem to me that a lot of the texts that talk about kind of our final moments of transformation are to do with the resurrection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't know what that means.
If Klein is correct that the first resurrection describes the
Yeah.
death of the martyrs,
Yes.
then we
I think
assume
that is the
glorification of
strongest
the
point.
spirit.
I actually think that's the strongest point.
Yeah.
Klein saves the day again. And that is what I'm leaning on more than anything else, to actually not be completely just overly ambivalent, no, not ambivalent, ambiguous about
Ambiguous.
the topic. I mean, yeah, I think if that is the case, then that is real. That's lucid. So, anyways, people have no idea what we're saying right now. Stop this. But my point was just simply that
we were asking the question: is there sanctification after death?
Yes.
And we said no. It must be some form of glorification because it's described as a first resurrection.
Exactly. So, and
that'll be in the Patreon for the Patreons to join in. They can have the rest of that discussion.
Exactly. And we have grown rather weary in talking about the subject, but here we are, and we've made we've set the date, and we're on to Meredith Klein, chapter 2 at 10 o'clock at night.
Images of the Spirit.
Images of the Spirit. See, what did I just say?
It's chapter 2.
Okay. Did I not give the title of the book?
See his published works.
See, in my mind, I just gave a full bibliography of the book. And
Whipfenstock.
And that's all.
The spirit is willing.
Okay, good. So we are thinking about Meredith Klein and Images of the Spirit, and we're talking
about Whipfenstock.
Yes. And the thing is, we did such a good job of chapter 1 last time.
Sure.
We got through the entire first paragraph. We thought, surely this must be reason for us to move on. So here we are, chapter 2, the priestly model of the image of God.
Priestly model of the image of God. That's just an intriguing opening, isn't it? Because the kingly model of the image of God is Adam and Eve.
Yes. Well, surely Adam, otherwise it'd be the king and queenly model.
There he is, called to have dominion.
Yes, yeah, dominion yes. And image is like so connected in everyone's book. Yeah. But with Klein, the immediate thing that I thought when I read this title is that he's got this priestly, kingly distinction even prior to the fall.
Yeah.
In that the kingly is subordinated to the priestly, right? So you've got this whole thing that he needs to do by way of his short range, kind of probationary work.
He's got to tend and keep before he gets the sabbatical rest.
Well, tend and keep as in Shema, God, the sanctuary. So he's got this priestly work as he encounters Satan, and then that will lead to this kind of semi-eschatological kingly idea. So as soon as I read that title, that's what I'm thinking about. Gotcha. But it didn't really go in that direction necessarily. So
no, it went in the direction of priests being robed and glorious investiture as the image of God.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, the thing that just took the whole chapter for me very clearly was the way in which, I mean, the garment of the priest is like a mini tent, which is a mini tabernacle with the ephod as the holiest of holies, as a cube. I was like, what?
Do you know what image came to mind? Matryoshka doll.
Yeah, the Russian.
You know, you got a doll inside a doll inside a doll inside a doll. So you got a tabernacle inside a tabernacle inside a tabernacle inside a tabernacle.
When you said that, I thought you had too many whiskeys.
Matryoshka. Yeah,
but it's just like
Russian dolls to the rest of the world.
Repeating pattern.
Yeah,
of tabernacles.
Yeah, getting smaller and smaller.
And the microcosms. Yeah, microcosm of a microcosm of a microcosm.
Yeah, very good. But isn't that amazing though? The way it's all fed through that. I mean, it's just like I must admit, he started off, and I was like, I don't know. Maybe this is not quite as compelling as the first chapter. And then I was like, oh wow,
Yeah.
look at that. And then he just keeps going. It's just relentless. And at the end, I was convinced. So
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's amazing, because you
I
have
was
the kind of
convinced.
the statement of, okay, obviously there's this parallel between the kind of the tabernacle
Hmm.
and the temple
Hmm.
with the cosmic temple of the whole of creation, with Eden as the Holy of Holies. And
Mm.
then you have, within that though, you have the kind of the priest as a kind of image within the temple,
Yes.
right? Reflecting Adam as an image within the temple. But
Hmm.
then you also have the priest as a microcosm of the whole temple itself,
Hmm.
but backwards. So that the
Yes.
clothes that he's wearing, so he's not a temple with the inward dwelling of the glory cloud,
Hmm.
but with the external glory cloud, because he's going into the temple where the glory cloud is. So his vestments reflect all the attributes of the temple, but backwards, where the glory is on the outside, not on the inside.
Oh wow.
And that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Like who picks that up? Is the first thing. Because I walked away from this chapter thinking, like, can I read the Bible? Am I able to do this? Should I stop? And then
Yeah,
the second
exactly.
question was, how did he do this? Was it just like he's getting out a concordance and he's just tracing every single word in the concordance through the Bible? Or is he just observing this as he's casually reading? Like, is
He
he just
was
reading it?
a hobbyist architect, so there's that.
He's okay. So
And
he's picking up on, yeah, he's like attuned to all the different kind of, like,
Did
yeah,
he
he
have
knows what a
Asperger's
vestibule
syndrome
is.
or some other mental
yeah. Well, he
illness
was
that
a
just made him
musician
zoom in?
and an architect and a theologian. You put those and an artist. You put those together, and what do you get? Boom. Here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. So he's picking up on visual things and
Yeah.
dimensional cues that aren't even like just they don't normally register with anyone else. Um, but yeah, I mean, lots. So I think also the thing for me was just that a lot of people talk about the way that it's not unusual to hear a biblical theologian talk about the tabernacle as a kind of portable Eden. It's reflecting all the
Yeah.
Eden imagery and so forth. But the way I think the thing that brought it, that sort of infused throughout was that the tabernacle is a replica of Eden, which is a replica of the glory spirit. You know,
Yeah.
this which, and then man's at the center of that, as you say, this kind of distilled kind of microcosm thing.
Yeah,
So that
really,
that's just brought all of the imagery,
Yeah.
to get
exactly. And
together.
talking about imagery, just something that struck me. Where he spoke about the two pillars
Yes. Whoa.
and then the canopy. And so you can imagine yourself in a moment, like there you are, you're an Israelite, you're walking around the temple.
Mm,
And there's the
Yeah.
two, suddenly there's that moment where Solomon's praying over the temple, there's the two
mm,
pillars, and there's the canopy, and there's a doorway to heaven
mm.
Yeah.
open in front of you. It's just like it's just a literal spectacle,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yes.
Yeah.
know, of a
Yes.
doorway to heaven.
And was I reading it right? Like, because this is something I thought was, it seemed quite different from the way that Josephus and perhaps some of the early church would talk about the temple, and even the later rabbis, I suppose, um, where you have the lavers, the bronze laver, and the water representing kind of the waters of the earth, and then
Yes.
you go through, and then the veil would be that which sort of allows a kind of gateway into the holiest of holies, which is the third heavens. It sounded like what Klein was doing was saying, it starts there, as you were just saying, Nick. You got this gateway straight into the holiest, this straight into the heavens of heavens, and then that is you walk into it, and that starts from that heavenly reality above the firmament on the waters. Working on this ancient Near Eastern sort of
Cosmology.
cosmology and so forth. And I thought, wow, I hadn't picked that up before, but that actually is a lot. That makes a lot more sense. Maybe it's both. I don't know. Maybe there
Well,
is a
I picked that up and I paused on it because I'm not sure what I think about it, because there is also the kind of bronze basin
yes.
that does have symbolic reference to land or the earth. I think there's some reference to it somewhere else in scriptures being called something to do with the earth. And so you have earth and sea.
There's the angel with the bronze legs, whose legs are on the earth.
Yes.
So I mean, it could be. I don't necessarily. It's not necessarily, but I had always seen that as kind of representing of the kind of the earth and sea in that outer court.
So the tabernacle, the footings were bronze, and then the fittings were silver, and then the final fittings are gold, giving you the three tiers.
Upward thing.
Yeah. So bronze does have relation to the lowest. The first.
Yeah, it almost felt like you could play around with that, and there'd be an amalgam of both.
You could be. I don't think it's mutually exclusive, but it wasn't what he was picking up on.
No.
And so it just gave me pause because
it was interesting in the way that he sort of went about it. There is so much material on that, that in history and whatnot, and many of I think probably gone overboard in their reflections on those points of symbolism. But it gave me an insight into Klein is just literally he's not interested in any of that. He's just looking at the text. He is seeing it for himself, and he's doing he's a true biblical theologian at that level. No reference at all to the mountain of literature on that topic. Coming up with something that's completely fresh, and yet at the same time just is obviously resonant with the passage.
Yeah, it's playing in well-worn territory, so it's a well-worn path, but he's just picking up on all kinds of angles and details that you don't normally. I think one thing I found a little bit not frustrating, but almost disappointing was that because he's making a very particular point, which is he's trying to draw the associations. Yeah, so he goes straight from Genesis to the kind of tabernacle temple, to the new creation. And I would have liked to have seen some of that. What does that mean for the church now? In the meantime, like how do Christians as renewed image bearers, what does that mean for the priestliness of it?
Doesn't he deal with Pentecost in a later chapter?
Priesthood, maybe in a later chapter. Priesthood of all believers, how it would work with in terms of understanding the church as a temple, all that kind of stuff. I just would have been fascinated to see what he would have done with that.
Yeah, I think I would see some of that coming up. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it might come up later because I'm not reading ahead. So
yeah,
but so a key idea here, he's obviously looking at the doctrine of the Holy Spirit through the lens of biblical theology, and it's recreation in the image of God as an act of investiture. So just thinking in terms of anthropology and soteriology and pneumatology and bringing these things together. And he lists, putting on the new man. There's that act of a glorious investiture of a renewal in the image of God. There's that recreation moment and the glory of the Spirit in a recreation moment. And then it's
armor of God as well.
Being clothed with our heavenly dwelling. Putting on the armor of God, or baptism, which is a putting on of Christ. These are just all these investiture moments which are linked to a recreation,
a biblical theology of clothing, basically moving through. Exactly. Showing you how important that is. Wow.
So it's just incredibly stimulating, and what I'm hoping people take away from our discussion is not our incredible understanding and wonderful summary of Klein's ideas, but just how stimulated we are in terms of all the multiple direction which he takes you as he opens up just all these wonderful themes.
I
have to be honest, when I preaching through Ephesians, hadn't picked up the kind of image investiture angle of the armor of God. I'd kind of connected it to gospel themes. So in a very general gospel armor. So I've in a very general way making the same point, but not in the kind of specifics of actually this relates to the priestly vestments. This relates to the image of God. And because the priest is a kind of image of God in the temple, this then takes you back to Adam, but also forward to Christ.
And Adam's role as a priest, where he should have judged Satan and driven him out of God. And there we are in spiritual priestly armor, resisting Satan, that he must flee from us.
So I still think this is why there's a there's a case for thinking about, to some extent, all Christians, but pastors in particular, as kind of taking up that mantle of guardians of sacred space. In the same way that there's this kind of, we are all priests, but in Israel was a priestly nation, but it still had priests, even though the whole nation functioned in a priestly way. I do think there's a kind of similarity there, maybe a parallel with, we are now the holy nation, the nation of kings and priests, but that doesn't mean that there's no kind of special set apart office of pastorate, of the presbytery. And so I wonder if that kind of idea that the church now is the new sacred space, and that there are still pastors entrusted with this kind of defense of the sacred space against kind of demonic intrusion. Yeah, I don't know what you guys thought about that.
It sounds like we might need vestments for those things, symbolic, like maybe black ones,
exorcisms,
maybe black long robes or something.
I don't know what you mean.
And then I think maybe beards as well. Oh, wait a minute, we got a whole denomination. Oh wait, that's Orthodox. Okay.
No, but do you not think that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of what's driving those guys for sure. But yeah. I mean, I think it's true. I don't know what is really to debate about that. I mean, as long as you're kind of happy with the clergy laity distinction of some sort, I suppose. Which
you have to be. There is obviously a clergy laity distinction of some sort.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean the rest is like you do have, I suppose, just a different way to word it, and maybe
it's about an emphasis. So because often, particularly in evangelical circles, you think about the kind of necessity of going out, right?
Yeah.
But what about the kind of task of protect? And it is, I mean, you connect it to, Paul's warning to the elders in Ephesus that there are, wolves will emerge from within you. So arising within the sacred space, there are these wolves, and you have to kind of expel the immoral brother. Again, this kind of getting the evil out of the church, that kind of church discipline, purification idea. So you do, I mean, there are, it's just, I've never really thought about it as from this perspective of the function of pastors or churches to guard the sacred space.
Yeah,
and it just kind of lends a bit of force and a bit of biblical depth to those injunctions to guard the flock and to watch out for wolves. And
and by space we're meaning what, like people, I suppose.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, well, I mean, the whole question of sacred space is an interesting one.
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys have noticed, but
what's your PhD again
about space and people, ritual?
I honestly couldn't tell you at this point.
I feel like that's bleeding out.
When I know, listen, you can't start talking about temples and then not start talking about sacred space. I don't know. I see a perfect logic.
You could have a very short dissertation go. Talking about people. The end. Thanks for coming.
Have you guys noticed that in the new NIV, the 2011 NIV, Genesis 1 verse 14, which talks about the kind of stars and the moon and the sun, to mark out the season, the days and the seasons and all that kind of thing. But in the NIV, it translates it as to mark out sacred times and seasons.
I don't read the NIV. I read the Christian Bible.
Yeah, the clearly spiritual version. But it's like a whole play on. So when you're reading it now, because we were doing our kind of family devotion thing, and it came up, and everyone kind of noticed it for the first time. They were just like, "What on earth is there such a thing as a sacred time?" Okay, it was mainly me. I noticed it. My kids didn't really care, but I brought it up. Is there such a thing as a sacred time? And I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting question. I think basically we don't think enough about the church as holy in the sense that Klein is describing here, like a gateway to heaven, right?
Eschatological intrusion.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, the Orthodox, from what I can see, really have gotten hold of this, with their not only their sacred space and tent-like garments, but even just in the
The
time
angels all
thing as
around.
well, and the festivals and whatnot. And they talk about it really is like fascinating to see because they're capturing, something of this Kleinian sort of like emphasis that that this building is the access point between heaven and earth. This is where
Yeah.
we come to heavenly Mount Zion, and they really roll with that. Um,
And they
so
worship Jesus in the bread. Golden calf moment.
yeah, I mean, there's all of that, you know. Um, Coming back to
Is it
Klein
though?
though,
Is it though, Nick?
Yes.
Is it a golden calf?
Clear golden calf moment.
You sure?
Yep.
well, I think that actually,
Just want you to be sure. That's all.
100%.
Okay,
I
good.
did recently watch Gavin Ortland and who was it? Stephen DeYoung. Is he a well-known guy? Stephen DeYoung? Who does he do? Well, what does he do?
Lord of Spirits.
Is he the Lord of the First guy? Stephen DeYoung.
Yeah.
Isn't
Yeah.
that Stephen Damick or something?
Andrew Stephen Damick's the other guy.
Oh. Oh,
You
well, that
like
makes
him,
it.
Mike. He's also got several PhDs and about 6 master's degrees.
Well,
So
that
he's on your page.
yeah, interesting. Because I mean, I did find him very enjoyable to. He was very reasonable in the way that he sort of went about the argument. But
Well, the Orthodox often are because they don't really care what you believe at the end of the day.
right. It was just very exactly. And
Yeah.
but
If
one
you
of the
bow
things,
to bread, you're bad.
well, one of the things that Ortland said, well, where the discussion headed was just that, I think this is the one thing that he's like not willing to in any way, kind of yield to, in that there is just a clear and obvious sort of in Nicaea 2 kind of gone rogue scenario there. So anyway, but coming back to Klein though, just before we spend the rest of the time on orthodoxy, this is the moment. But the tense styling of the garments, it's got me thinking about the robes and the Orthodox. Tense styling of the garments seems to be accentuated. I love this. Thus, the seamless robe is clearly a scaled down tent.
Clearly.
Coming back to, can we even read our Bibles? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So also the ephod, made in front and back, flaps connected by straps over the shoulder ridge, possibly the arrangement of golden cords by which the breastpiece was fastened down to golden rings in the ephod was meant to bring to mind tent pegs and cords. I was just like, whoa, that is
But I like how with that he's like, this is a possible illusion, whereas the other ones are dead certain.
yeah.
But this one possibly could be. I don't want to. I wouldn't put my stake in the ground here.
It's just another layer of Matryoshka dolls. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it seems perfectly like at least as solid as all the others. And so, yeah. But he's like, this one I'm not sure about. But yeah,
yeah. And then the way the ephod talks about the holiest of holies, and wow, it was just see him develop that imagery all the way through. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah. So I mean,
and the
just
oil,
think about
pouring of the oil was another thing. Anyway,
exactly. It's Matryoshka dolls all the way through. It's just repeat from another perspective.
Can we call them Russian dolls, Nick? No one calls them Matryoshka dolls.
Well, Russian Orthodox might be a just kidding.
Well, Matryoshka sounds pretty Russian to me. I don't know. Just saying.
What have you got against Russia, Andre?
Nothing. I'm saying I'm sort of pro the name Russian doll because it has meaning.
Okay.
So these Matryoshka dolls.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. What are we saying
about? So just as he develops the whole idea in terms of image, investiture, and covenant.
Mm-hmm.
So then so we've got these investiture moments, whether it's the glory over the temple, whether it's the robe on the priest, and then it's the husband covering his bride.
Yeah, that was his last point.
I mean, I wanted to weep at that moment.
I
This
know.
is gospel, beautiful moments. And he
Well,
goes into Ezekiel 16,
yeah.
and there's God walking past this baby, and he covers her.
Mm,
And this is glorious picture of
mm.
God wrapping his
And
covering
even
over
the
his
image
bride.
of Christ and the church and the bride and so forth. I mean, we
Yeah,
all know the parallel, and that obviously it says it clearly in the New Testament, but with marriage and whatnot. But just to see how rich that is,
yeah,
in
Yeah.
terms of the whole and its connection to the tent and its connection to the
Yeah.
covering and its connection,
and his
it's just
connection
like,
to justification, the garment of salvation that he clothes us with.
whoa,
Yeah, he
Yeah.
gives us clothing. The Jacob giving Joseph clothing,
yes,
just that gift of clothing. It's
yeah,
just a
And
profound.
also the kind of weird references to the covering the kind of the corner of your covering with the corner of the kind of sheet or whatever.
Yep,
yes,
That that goes into the weird things with kind of like Ruth, not
Ruth and
Ruth, is it?
Boaz.
yes,
Yeah, Ruth and Boaz.
yes,
That it's all linked to the same idea about covering over, and that
Yeah,
kind of glory covering
right,
God's people and sheltering them and taking them, and that connection to covenant, right? So
yeah,
that
100%.
this is now a covenantal gathering and a naming of God's people and protecting.
yeah, the
And
naming
it kind
thing,
of makes sense of all that. That why is this all these like weird? Why are we told about all that stuff? And then you see it all coming together. Yeah, it's beautiful.
yeah,
It always
Totally
feels,
righteous.
whenever I read Klein, I'm always like, it feels like I'm doing left brain thinking. Because there's like the normal way of thinking, and then there's left brain thinking. That's like Klein. Like he just lived in the left brain, and it's like all these connecting dots I didn't
right,
think were dots
Yeah.
that needed to be connected, and yet they all legitimately seem to connect.
yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
Yeah,
very
it's like
inspiring.
beauty dissected,
Yeah, it's
analytically.
glorious.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
But
uh,
it's
like
funny
there's
though, because it gets your imagination going there.
yeah.
Like so there's a lot of stuff for your
And
right
also,
brain.
I have noticed his writing style here is very technical and analytical versus like God, Heaven, and Armageddon, where he really just lets rip with the more sort of. It does
Yeah.
feel at times that you're reading from Lord of the Rings or something, with his epic sort of prose.
Yeah.
But a little bit, I suppose this is earlier on, and perhaps a little bit
It feels a
more
bit
in line.
scholastic sometimes. Like
Yes,
he
I actually felt like he held back.
yeah. Well, that's what
Whereas
I'm
if I
saying.
read Beale or if I read Ferguson on the Holy Spirit, it feels like they develop it a lot more systematically. And he just
okay.
sort of just like throws out a hint, one line, and
Yeah.
it's like, whoa, someone else has developed that into a page.
Yes,
You
Yeah.
yes,
know?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then we've gone past much of what he says about the connection between the creation, the 7 day, and then the building of the tabernacle and the seven speeches and so forth, and the filling of the tabernacle as a kind of indication of the way in which the Sabbath destiny of man and the cosmos and so forth. But I always think of Lee Irons's article at that point where he I think it was on Leviticus, something I can't remember the exact title of the article now, but if you Google Lee Irons Leviticus, you'll get it. And I'm pretty sure it's still on his website, where he just really, I think, runs with similar ideas here and just shows the connection between Aaron as an Adam figure in all these ways, all these symbolic little moments that show that you're dealing here with another sort of echo of the covenant of works, in being with this Adam figure now sort of bringing in redemptive imagery as he has to go and represent the people and make sacrifice for sin and so forth, but also just this covenant of works imagery and forming a kind of echo of Adam and a foreshadowing of Christ at the same time. Really a great article. So and almost takes these same themes and just kind of, as you said earlier, Nick, just kind of develops them into page upon page. So worth reading in connection to this chapter. Good. Yeah, we've covered the armor, and lots to say there. Wow, we didn't even.
There was a moment. I've been trying to find it all the way through. I don't know if you guys know where it is, but I've been trying to find it. I noted it as I was reading it through. I underlined it, but I can't find it. And it's where he basically talks about the roles of the priest. He gives this really good summary of what it meant what it meant to be a priest. I don't know if you guys know the line that I'm talking about. It was like a literally one sentence where
Oh, really?
he just lists all the different descriptions of it. And I remember reading that and thinking to myself, man, this is such a good description.
It's a
that
very
you could
dense
then
description, one line. Yeah.
yeah, in one line, but you could also then take it to see this theme develop, and you could see how it points to Christ, but also how through Christ this then um you can see the kind of failure of Adam, but you can also see forward to the church, and there was lots to develop there, but I can't find it. So I don't know. I don't know where it is.
I want to know where that line is now.
I know. I thought it was quite early on in the chapter as well, and then like he has this like where he just describes the kind of guarding, keeping,
Yes.
the kind of government rule side of things, and he just lists like these attributes of what it means. So useful. But
yeah, that's not really well. That nothing comes to mind. Weird. Well, I probably
if you guys don't talk to me for a while, I'll find it. But
okay.
I loved where he spoke about Eden as a microcosm sanctuary, so holy ground protected by men and angels. So bringing the angels into conversation, that holy space, that sacred space there, Andre.
Yes.
And there's the Prince of.
Sorry, I thought you were not going to talk to me so that I could find it, but now.
And then there's the Prince of Tyre, who is described in Ezekiel as that guarding, that covering cherub, present on the mountain of Eden, the mountain of Eden. And it reminded me of your talk, Mike. The mountain.
Oh, right. Yeah, totally. And a lot of that comes from this text as well. Yeah, that gives you some indication that whatever we are to make of this figure, that imagery around Eden is really helpful.
It's really hard not to see the serpent in the background.
I'm very happy with it. I'm happy for there to be a human figure, and then the principality behind the human figure is the devil.
Yeah.
Well, but some would say that you have Adam, as the guardian cherub.
Yeah.
Yes,
so he
makes
the picture intelligible.
Yeah.
But I personally don't think so. I personally think that you're meant to see Satan behind the King of Tyre, not Adam.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think so.
Wayne Grudem is correct.
Wow.
It does happen.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Well, the things like when he says the discovery of the biblical nexus between concepts of the image of God and divine covenant validates covenant theology's identification of the Creator's relationship to man at the beginning as a covenantal relationship. In the light of the interrelation we have found between covenant and image of God, the fact of man's creation in God's image, explicitly affirmed in Genesis 1:27, would in and of itself signify the existence of a covenant. I use that. He
is the greatest covenantal apologist who's ever lived.
Yeah, I mean, I find that so compelling.
I agree.
It was one of the things that just really I was like, that's it. I can't ever unsee covenant theology.
I don't think Klein can walk past anything like that and not mention, and this proves covenant.
Right. But I mean, it really, I mean, for me, that is one of the most helpful insights that one can have, for the image, to connect it to this whole covenant of works idea. And it just gives the whole thing meaning, which of course, only covenant theologians are going to do. Yeah. But they suffer for not doing it. These guys that are wrestling it, you can see it when you look at the material. It's sort of the as he says, the nexus point, the kind of key that opens the door to seeing the riches of how this all fits together, especially when you get to like Christ and the covenant servant, and he is the fullness of that image, and my goodness, it all comes together at that point. But one of the thinking about that covenant thing, I just finished a class now where I read we were comparing the relationship of Adam and Eve. So Adam's made in the image of God, right? And Adam is in covenant with God in this covenant of works. And now man enters into a covenant with woman, right? And there's this kind of imaging going on, right? Their covenant ends in a consummate union. Right. But the woman and man come together, and it's this foreshadowing of union. It's their covenant ends in this consummate union, so to speak. And so the whole thing is just So we were just talking about that stuff, and then I read this last chapter, which this is one of the things that I love about the way that he describes all this. It's got some classic Kleinian moments in my mind as well. In Genesis 2, marriage covenant is presented explicitly in the form of a societal analog to mankind's covenantal image relationship to God. Boom. Through the parable of the marriage relationship of the man and the woman established by creation ordinance, instructive insight was afforded into the nature of the covenant between God and man. The woman wife,
The woman wife, the man
which is
husband.
what I now call my wife, the woman wife.
Woman wife.
The woman wife derived from the man as bone of his bone, and he's going somewhere with this, right? This is going to be okay. The woman wife derived from the man as bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh was the image likeness of man, right? The name pun Isha in Hebrew, she was called Isha because she was taken from Ish, man. The man husband received the woman, his image, in a covenant of marriage under his lordship, to bear his name, to be his glory, not least by bearing him image sons to fill the earth with his name. I mean, this is amazing.
The woman wife, the man husband, and the image sons. Yeah.
The parable of human marriage covenant was fully exploited in the revelation of redemptive recreation and covenant. The church bride, see the whole thing. The church bride, derived from Christ, the second Adam, as the glory of his glory and spirit of his spirit, is a recreation in his image. So it's almost like you get a glimpse into what Paul was thinking when he said, and this is a mystery, and this is exactly what we're talking about. As a likeness,
that goes back to what he said at the end of the first chapter as well, because we kind of threw this up but didn't go into it. But he said, and it's connected to that idea that you can't simply equate being human with being the image of God in a kind of without ignoring the complexity of it. And he said, it's not that the man-woman relationship is an image likeness of the inter-Trinitarian relationships, but that the man-woman relationship mirrors the glory-reflecting relationship of mankind to God, in which the image of God in mankind actually does consist. The analogy to the image of God idea is that it's involved in the man-woman relationship is, according to the apostles' teaching, that the woman, as one derived from the man in creational origin, is the glory of the man, just as mankind, both man and woman, as creational offspring of the spirit glory, is God's reflective glory image. Womanhood is thus viewed in scripture as another analog, along with human sonship, of man's image status.
Agreed. I mean, that difficult phrase, the woman is made in the glory of man, as opposed to we would expect him to say the glory of God. That accounts for the difficulty of that statement.
Isn't that amazing? It's just awesome. It's like you get a glimpse into Paul's mind,
Totally. And let me throw something else in. So here's a Nick side thought. When people come to me and they'll ask, Nick, can you have sex outside of marriage? And I say, God does not have union apart from covenant. All union takes place in the context of covenant. That's why sex ought to be done in the context of marriage, the covenant.
I'm almost trying to figure out a way to show how Satan, in his drawing of a kind of union outside of that covenant, might be, but that might be too far. And 1 step, 2 step, we're fundamentalists. End of story.
But I mean, if marriage is a picture of Christ and the bride, and union is in the context of covenant, I mean that's the foundational. That's what makes sex inside of marriage intelligible as a law for Christians.
I like it.
And it's why the Lord's Supper is only for Christians, those who are in covenant with the Lord. So, I found the quote, by the way.
Okay, give it to me.
Let's hear it.
Can I come back to this bit of a shift of gear? But for the so page 46 in the actual book, for the ritual of Aaron's investiture and anointing was an ordination to priesthood, a placing of the government upon his shoulders,
Right.
and a filling of his hands with the keys of judicial authority. And it
Mm.
will be seen that the biblical concepts of the image of God and Messiah are very much the same. So what I really liked about that description of the priesthood is the way that it's connecting the priesthood and the messiahship, so that the kind of, well, and even so it's the priesthood with the kind of image thing, but also the priesthood with the Messiah thing, and how it ties all those things together. But then also I think, and I don't know if he's going to go there later, but how that kind of description of government but judicial authority, how I wonder how that plays out in terms of church life, and again the offices
I
of
wonder
the
if
pastorate.
that's more of a reference to Isaiah 9:6. The government shall be upon his shoulder.
Mm.
And then the keys of death and hell, the keys of
Mm.
David, Revelation, rather than the keys of the kingdom. In terms
Even just
of,
yeah, I think that's right. But even just that line, it will be seen that the biblical concepts of image of God and Messiah are very much the same.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, again,
Yeah.
it sort of ties into covenant service, image of God, and all those things that you can kind of see. But amazing the way that the idea of anointing and image, and we haven't even really gone there yet.
But it is just how Klein is tying all these things together. Like it's the Russian doll thing, the microcosm within microcosm, but also the kind of clothing motif with the image motif, with the priesthood motif, with the Messiah motif, with the kind of glory motif and the temple motif. And
it really is a tapestry, isn't it? It's just
well, I mean, and that's it. And so like you actually realize that, let's say you just want to, I don't know, do a biblical theology of the temple. You start off by thinking, well, that's relatively straightforward. You just look for the word temple.
And very soon you're going down all these rabbit trails.
Well,
but
clothing.
Yeah, I know, exactly. We were just talking about
marriage.
It really is like, it's sort of one of the, because we were doing all this work like up front in class going, okay, we have to like sort of establish our themes that we're sure these themes are important for this whole thing, and we're gonna stick to them, like and they're all like, well, what's the point of all this, and well, it's to keep you from going crazy when you start down the process, because you need to just, they veer so quickly and mesh so quickly. If you're not lucid about these themes and what you're actually looking for, I mean, it's enough to really just it's beyond three-dimensional, in many ways. It just goes into something else. And just even trying to preach a sermon on Sunday, when you're tracking through some biblical,
and
you
people
get yourself in a real mess,
if people don't get this, that actually when you study the passage all week to preach on Sunday, the exercise at some point switches from let me discover information to how on earth am I going to decide what not to say, because then you have to basically cut away all these treasures that all these rich strings of the tapestry you're just cutting away, because you can't say it all. But what it gets me thinking about with the Bible is that it's a little bit like when you do that, right? And you think, okay, I've delved deep into this passage of all these commentaries. I've got all this stuff that I want to now try and communicate to my church that hasn't so far been on this journey with me. Okay, so they're coming in cold on a Sunday, and I got to pull this out. And then you do your best to try and like simplify it and get to the core and the essence. And then you realize that the Bible is basically God doing that for us. Like he's from the wealth of his mind, and how he understands, he's now putting it, he's condescending, to a language and a format that we can understand. And so it's no wonder to me that when you just start to scratch slightly beneath the surface of the Bible, it just kind of you just see, you just see these
what else is amazing? You take, I mean, definitely, I don't know, maybe I'm missing, but I don't think if you jump into the Quran, for example, you just can't do this. This is not happening. It's like reading a sort of like the book of Proverbs or something, maybe at best, but kind of not as good
Doesn't
version.
have a unifying grid.
Yeah,
It's
nothing,
in the
nothing at
warp
all.
and the woof of it all.
And yeah, you feel it. You really do feel it. I suppose when you spend a lot of time preaching and so forth, and you're always in the text, it's just like, it's very obvious. You go to another text like the Quran, it's just not. We're not talking about the same thing. And then what are the other options really? I mean, you got what
Exactly.
Buddhism, which isn't really even claiming to be from God to begin with, and then you got Hinduism, which I've only ever
Multiple
looked at a.
gods.
Well, they got something like 6,000, or what was it, six
Oh,
thousand?
many more, many
But
more.
but they're not none of their works are translated, number one, so you couldn't even get, if you wanted to get all of the, do you want to figure out what the full the thing encompasses. So I've just looked at what half of, so I'm really not a specialist at any of this, but half of one of the translated scrolls, and I mean it's the same thing. It's like there's just nothing, there's no, even you could see how even a in detailed detailed study would not, it's just not the same thing.
Exactly.
The closest, much closer, would be like a study of maybe Homer's Iliad and so forth. But they, I mean, even you read the best scholarship on those poetic themes and whatnot, and they're not what we're talking about here.
No.
I
I mean,
they're
just
poetic ideas that perhaps
100%.
are vaguely connected. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, my impression is, and this is moving into the sphere of
I
apologetics,
suppose. But yeah,
biblical theology proves the single authorship of Scripture. So although there's 66 human authors, or 66 books written by 40 plus human authors, you have this single author behind it all, tracing out these single themes over thousands of years through 40 different authors. And you see a picture of a tabernacle, you see a picture of marriage, you see a picture of a priest, you see a picture of investiture.
but it's not just an echo; it's a deep interwoven
It's
theology.
so rich.
So
It's
this is
rich.
the thing that sets it apart.
It's the
So
unity of Scripture that betrays the God's authorship of the Scriptures.
yeah,
And isn't it ironic that the whole biblical theology discipline came about because of people who didn't believe that?
well, it didn't in that what you're, because it
The
came,
liberal version.
what we're talking about here is actually just covenant theology. What Voss and so forth were, they were just kind of like,
So I'm talking pre-Voss, all right?
Yeah.
Pre-Voss.
The liberals.
You've got it was the liberals. It was the biblical.
but they weren't doing what we're doing now.
No, but the whole impetus that you would take, I don't know, one theme in one letter, and you wouldn't, and you just kind of trace it through, and then that became well, hang on, just look at Pauline and separate that from anything else, and you're not trying to harmonize it with any other text. You're just looking at Paul, and so eventually, then though, people started doing that, and seeing actually lots of points of interconnection, and then the whole thing kind of turned in on itself, and now it, like we say, it's this beautiful example of unity and diversity, where you have the diversity of human authors and the unity of the divine author. But I just find it, I don't know.
I don't know. I think what Voss did basically was kind of infuse an otherwise really dead area. It was just a good area of scholarship around the text, but infuse it with the federal method. And just that's really what wasn't being done by the liberals. They didn't.
Yeah, but even outside of reform circles, biblical theology still developed. Like evangelicals grabbed hold of it, where you're just exploring themes from beginning to end. You're not.
Have you ever read? One of the most depressing things to do, though, is to read like a bad book of biblical theology.
Oh, really?
And, I mean, it really is just. I could get through anything else easier.
I don't know about you, brothers, but I get so frustrated when I read maybe someone's PhD or whatever, and they've been forced to have a conversation with liberals on any topic, and just like they have to refute a bunch of guys that just aren't thinking biblically.
Yeah, you just think, even when you have like evangelicals that are in the text and they're kind of working through, and they've got all these themes they're working through, and they're kind of knitting it together, but there is just no
covenant theology.
There's no glory. Yeah, there's no covenant theology. Ultimately, I think is what's going on.
That too.
It really is. It's sort of like, it feels very wrong when you read that. It feels like it's inundating it with technical sort of nothingness. At the end of the day, it's.
But it seems like it's the answer to Roman Catholicism and their charge of legal fiction. There's no legal fiction. There's a covenant head. There's federal theology. The new perspective on Paul, same answer. You know, it's just covenant theology just ticks so many boxes.
And you don't have to read apologetics. You just read Meredith Klein. If you're worried about, whether the faith is true, you just open up this book, and my goodness, I often say to the
You'll
guys,
see
like,
the scarlet thread running throughout the whole of Scripture.
Amen. What is the problem with that?
Scarlet thread.
But what I do feel like if on my deathbed or going down I'm not going to be thinking about Josh McDowell and
No.
the case. I mean, those things are
Oh,
good.
I see. Oh, no.
Evidence that demands a verdict.
But I'm going to be thinking about this stuff. This is what's going to give me assurance. I'm telling you right now.
That's
That
glorious.
is the thing. Yeah, assuming I can think. And
the morphine hasn't got you going.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, imagine Klein on morphine.
I'd want to be there.
Someone can read Klein to me while I'm on morphine.
I don't think that would be a bad idea at all. All right. Good. Well, I suppose that's a wrap.
Klein on morphine.
Good. All right. So I think we covered that exhaustively.
Oh yeah, that's
thoroughly.
Everyone fully tracked with us. It's exhausted, comprehensive.
So we're ready for chapter 3 next time, the prophetic.
But I did think about like what it would look like as a podcast if we actually just went through all the biblical references. You know what I mean? Like if you actually just sat down and you just worked through it. Like, okay, so here's Isaiah 69, and here's how that's leading into this.
There's no Isaiah 69.
There is an Isaiah 69. Anyway, I digress.
66.
And 69. Okay, I'm gonna just
66. It's just like
66
like a little
books of the Bible.
It's a microcosm of the book of the Bible.
Oh,
And this is why we have 66. This is the Protestant canon. we take it from the versification.
Enoch is not a book of the Bible. Neither is Psalm 151.
It is a really weird phenomenon, that Isaiah thing. Like, even the way the change happens around, the 30. Yeah, it's just there are all sorts of things about that are uncanny. But anyway,
the point I was going to make was it would be a boring podcast if we did that. I think you just have to do that on your own. You can't talk that through. So you can only really touch down on some of the themes. To work through it all would be a very different thing.
It's good. It's good. It's fun to read it through and just talk about it, and then you can always come back to it. So let's do that, and we're making good progress. Yeah, my goodness, chapter 3 next time, and we might even get through like another book of Meredith Klein at this this rocket ship pace, and then we can just.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
No. Look at us though. We're halfway.
We've never done it.
We did it with my book.
Okay, we did.
We did do it. We got through
Didn't
the whole
we finish?